Okay, I think that we can probably get started. What do you think, Laura?
Sounds good.
Okay, my name is Pat Dawn. I'm one of the co-founders of Globalyceum. I'm formerly a professor of history at San Jose State University. And this is Laura Guardino. You want to say hi, Laura?
Hi, I'm Laura Guardino. I have been a part-time instructor at Evergreen, Gavilan, and San Jose State University for the last 15 years, and I also teach history.
Okay, great. So we're going to be talking about hybrid education today on this webinar. We're going to try and keep this to about 25 minutes if we can at all possible, even 20 if we can. And then we'll take questions at the end. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. Some of you have already sent questions to us asking us about topics that interest you with regard to hybrid education. So here's 4 of the questions that pretty much summarize what many people have concerns about.
Hey, Pat, you're not sharing screen.
Oh, I'm not sharing screen?
You're not sharing screen.
Okay, excuse me. Let's see. Exit. Oopsie. All right. Perdón. Sorry.
No worries, you got it.
Okay, here we go. And let me get into presentation mode. Nope, not quite. Need to go back. Questions. Okay, here we go. Okay, are we good now, Laura?
Yes.
Okay, so these are some of the questions that you had. Many of you were asking us, is hybrid going to be a big part of the future in college education? And one of the reasons why we're doing this webinar is because we have been told by professors, yes, there seems to be a lot more sections of hybrid education going forward. And we've heard from some administrators that they are going to increase the number of hybrid sessions because they believe that they need to have that kind of flexibility going forward. And now they're pretty assured that college professors have more technical skills than they did a year ago because of COVID, okay? Another question is, how do you choose between where you put in class and online to create student engagement? What kind of curriculum goes in there? And this is one of the things that Laura and I will be talking about here in this session. I'm going to kind of move you up there, Laura, so we can see this better. What is the student success rate in hybrid education? Well, this one is interesting because if you're comparing it to in-class, there isn't a huge amount of research about that subject, but there is research, at least of a few years ago, that hybrid was superior to straight 100% online, there seemed to be an advantage to the hybrid by having those in-class sessions. Students may be more technically capable nowadays than they were a couple of years ago, but still it seems that the hybrid is kind of a Goldilocks sweet spot in the middle that makes it possible for professors to do both. Is it essential for hybrid and online education to record your lectures? And this is a big question because it's a lot of work that goes into recording lectures, okay, setting them all up. And what we found is the professors who just make the PowerPoint with their lecture notes available to students actually do as well, if not better. Students sometimes really have very little patience for video recordings. They like to skim, they like to surf, and they like to read at their own pace. So when people ask me this question nowadays, I says, I don't think that I put that much effort into recording my lectures. I think I just make my PowerPoints and my lecture notes available. And there's a couple of different ways you can do this, which we will talk about when we do group emphasis and we do what's called mirrored. So let me take on the next step. Let's see. Oops, what have I got here? Okay, so here we have quality matters is the key factor that needs to be remembered when you're doing anything that is either hybrid or online. Quality matters are standards that are used across the United States. Don't worry, we'll go ahead and we'll make these slides available to you afterwards. But essentially, there are 4 elements to quality matters that are probably the most important. And that is that when you're teaching online or hybrid, and also is useful in class, is that you have very varied assessments, okay? And you have a lot of them, multiple opportunities, it's called. The other thing is that your instructional materials Allow the students to engage. In other words, they're practicing in the discipline. You're not just lecturing them all the time, you're providing other kinds of curriculum opportunities. The other thing is learning activity, learning interaction, which means that students are working more in groups, okay? And then the other thing is the amount of course technology you're using. The way that universities determine whether or not you're doing a good job is based upon these national standards, Quality Matters being the most frequent one, but they're all very similar. They're asking you to do these kinds of varieties and these kinds of active learnings and these kinds of group engagements and this multiple use of technology. Now, the definition of a hybrid course, very quickly, is according to the standards, the national standards, it means that 50% of your sessions are in class or in person and 50% are online. Now, Laura and I have discussed this because we know a lot of universities who aren't doing this. They are maybe meeting the class every 3 weeks, you know, or maybe 4 times a semester or something like that. I'm supposing that in the future that the universities are going to abide by the standards set out nationally about what determines a hybrid class or what is not, but it's very clear that if you aren't at least 50% of the time in class, it's technically not considered a hybrid course. It's an online course. Okay, now, you know, you can go ahead and make only a third of your things, of your sessions in class and 2/3 online. You'll have to make some adjustments, but we had to make a choice in this webinar as to how to do this. So we're doing what the national standards say, which is a hybrid course is 1 week in class, 1 week online, 1 week in class, 1 week online. Okay, the character of these hybrid courses is determined by what you choose to put in class. That's the most important decision because a lot of things can be put online, all right? The second thing that's critically important is, are you going to use an asynchronous environment or a synchronous environment? Your university, because your students have got to meet in class at a particular dates and particular times, they're going to essentially block students from taking courses at that place at that time. So you could do synchronous, but what we are hearing from professors out in the field is that the universities are allowing the professors to choose whether they want to be synchronous online or asynchronous online. They are determining the class, but they are allowing professors some latitude as to what they're going to do. So the 3 things that we're going to show you here: traditional lecture emphasis, group emphasis, mirrored course. These are 3 ways of basically setting up a classic hybrid course. The traditional lecture emphasis is if you've been a really strong lecture professor, you don't want to quite jump in all the way to do everything that Quality Matters standards, maybe you're kind of feeling your way into it, is basically emphasizing your lecture in class. The group emphasis is much more in line with what Quality Matters standards say, and it's taking advantage of the fact that you're in class and you're going to do a lot of your active learning, your group working in class, and leave more of the non-active elements in the asynchronous mode or even another synchronous mode. The mirrored course is pretty much going to meet all of the standards of Quality Matters because it's essentially in class the same set of curriculum choices as you have online. And this is where you're going to be using Zoom or any kind of group, group breakout rooms located within a conferencing technology like Zoom, okay? So essentially, that's what the difference between the 3 are. You can make variations on these, but essentially this is where they are, kind of located. Now, in a traditional lecture emphasis course, okay, you have in class where you're going to put the emphasis being you presenting a lecture. So you have your class organization you've got to do, and you use your in-class time best, by making sure that your class organization, your students know what they're doing for the next 2 weeks in the class organization. You can consolidate your lectures to 2 75-minute sessions. You deliver them, and then you have lecture quizzes. If you're following Quality Matters with a frequent opportunities for assessment, you are doing lecture quizzes or tests, maybe at the last 10 minutes of class, or the students go home and they take the lecture quiz at home, okay, or the test. In the online environment, you tend to be very asynchronous. You obviously are doing your textbook readings and you're reading quizzes, you know, from Globalyceum or from some, you know, maybe a paper textbook or maybe another platform which has textbook readings and reading quizzes. These reading quizzes would be online, but they're done individually by the student. And then you go, and you can also, again, thinking about quality matters, the idea of doing active learning, but maybe on an individual basis. Here you go and you assign a primary source activity or a lab if you're in psychology, and you're doing objective or subjective grading of those assessments. Now, here's where I'm running into a little bit of a problem, so I'm going to go into stop share. And then I'm going to go over here because, oops, excuse me. Here we go. Great. Okay. So now I'm going to go over to showing how this would look in Globalyceum. So here, and we can, at the end of this, if you're interested in having an account with Globalyceum, there's no obligations. We can set you up with your own account. I have my own account here, as you can see, and we can basically copy this information into that account so that you can actually see this more carefully. Those instructions will follow. I'm sorry. Am I sharing screen? I'm sorry. Not sharing screen?
You're not sharing
Laura.
Screen.
Yeah.
Oh, it's okay.
Sorry. Okay. Okay. So now I'm sharing screen.
Yes.
Okay, great. It'll be easier when you start talking and I can manage things. Okay. So, so for example, in Globalyceum, you have your class organization for 2 weeks. Okay. And the place that we do this, you should really, in online classes and hybrid classes, you should always have your class organization, not only delivered verbally, but also in writing. So for example, here, I'm saying to the students, these two sessions this week in our class, it's going to be in the classroom on campus. I will deliver 2 lectures on psychological science. And then on Thursday, we will reserve the last 10 minutes of class for you to take a 10-point quiz on the information I covered in the lectures. So that's one way of doing it. All the lectures are in class, and then your quiz follows. The next week, you're saying to the students, these 2 weeks are done at home and online. This week, read the 3 text readings. So for example, in Globalyceum, I'll show you that in a second, where you go and you're reading the 3 text readings and you're completing the reading quizzes that go with them. Again, frequent assessment. And then you can complete on your own the activity, evaluate the little Albert experiment, okay? So for example, here we go, and essentially you can see the class organization for 2 weeks, the psychological science lecture quiz, which you can make on Globalyceum, for example, in activities and resources. And then over here, you have your 3 readings and your 3 reading quizzes, and then you have your activity. And the readings are essentially looking something like this, where they're, or in Globalyceum, they are all recorded. The students are told up front that these key terms are basically linked to the tests, the quizzes. And then there are images, videos, etc., that help the students with the reading. Globalyceum readings are all designed, many of the readings nowadays are designed so that they really help the students read well, okay? And then the other really nice thing is the activity. Many of you have said, well, gee, how do I do this? So I'm going to show you in psychology. In Globalyceum over here, for example, we go and we have activities and labs for all of each one of our units. We have activities that go with them. And the Little Albert experiment goes with this particular psychological science reading. And the way it looks is something like this, where it's a discussion about the Little Albert experiment, explaining to the students, and then the students can do and analyze the evidence assignment, where they are watching the video and then they're answering the questions, which is evaluating this particular experiment, which is essentially was an older experiment, which is unethical nowadays and would not meet IRB standards. So you're asking the students to evaluate it to show why it doesn't meet IRB standards. So that's just the way it's set up on Globalyceum. I'm showing you how it would be set up. Students generally just read from top to bottom. They go on, they know what they're doing. They're in class 1 week, they're out of class the second week, and they've got everything done in the order. It's presented in the order of how they are supposed to do it, okay? So now let's see, I'm going to go over to our webinar. We're going to have Laura show you the second way, which is group emphasis. Okay, just going to show you how this is done, and we will go and come over here and take you down to this area. Okay.
Okay, group emphasis. This is the method that I prefer the most because it fits my individual teaching style. So when I've done hybrid classes, I really prefer my in-class time to be group emphasis. That way I can really get the students discussing, working together, collaborating, and I can pop around and help everybody in their groups and really get to know my students. Then I have all of my lectures, my reading quizzes, everything that's going to be in the asynchronous environment. So in class, I'm going to do that little Albert experiment in class as a group activity where we really get to have an in-depth discussion on it. And I'm going to do all of my primary source activities in class together. I'll also use that time in class to kind of clarify what's going on and what my expectations are for the week. Then on their asynchronous time, they are going to be doing all of the stuff that I feel most confident in my teaching ability to put off online. And one of the advantages of a hybrid model is that you really get to teach to those different modalities, which is what Quality Matters standards are asking for. So you get to do interactive projects online, in face-to-face. You get to try different ways that students learn in different modalities. And it really, this way is what I'm most comfortable doing. And research shows that it builds a lot more engagement when the students move to that online environment to doing that work if you're spending some of that time in group emphasis or group work in class and collaboration with your discussions. So Pat, let's show what that looks like in Globalyceum.
Okay.
So on the group emphasis, when they're going to come to me, you're going to see that first week in class and the class organization. And Pat is right. It is critical in the hybrid environment, no matter which of these three modes that you try, that you really set your schedule with intentionality. All the research says that you want to make the most of your strengths and give the students different ways to learn as possible. Students actually enjoy the online environment when they are feeling that they're in control of their own learning. If a student can feel engaged with the course and set his or her own schedule, the studies show that those are the students that do the best. Yes, we have our lovelies that need a lot of help and organizational skills coming along, but this method is really great for the student to learn and remember the knowledge way after they leave your class, which to me that's a real high point. So I always make sure that we lay out everything very intentional, very clear, so they can go back and forth between the different modes.
Okay, so we're going to just show the Jacob Riis. Is that right, Laura?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite activities to do with them because it's a visual activity. So this is what I would do in class. I would show this video. We would discuss about it. I would bring my own background knowledge into it. Then I would show the sources in class. So then this is a visual source. So they're going to look at all of these pictures and we're going to go through it. We'll have a little discussion. I'll ask them to point things out, and then I'll go to the analyze the evidence. And these activities have helped me structure my class discussions. And what I love about it is that they can work from their device. I've gone paperless with this. So in my in-class session, they can all be collaborating on this common document through the functions of group work in Globalyceum. And you're going to have one group leader. They're going to be able to fill it out, and then you're going to be able to look at their answers and pull these points of discussions in your debrief after it. So you see the little manage group grading. This is superior in my mind to Canvas because it really does good at putting students in group, electing. You see the little scholar next to the people, and that allows them to be the group leader. And this allows me to do group work in class, grade it electronically, really shuffle the groups so that students are randomized. I can also put them in specific groups. So if I want to keep the same groups from in face-to-face session to face-to-face session, I can, but this allows me to have them all on the same page, have a really quality historical thinking discussion, and really get a lot out of my face-to-face time in my group work. And
I'm sorry, no, go ahead.
that,
I was going to mention As I just pointed out, you can move the students around into whatever group that you want, okay? But the other thing is that the way the Globalyceum's group works, which is kind of superior to many others, is that this group leader is the only one who can answer the question because they're submitting for the whole group. But if these students, Amy, Sarah, and Angela, do not check into the assignment when it's opened by the group leader, in other words, in class or online, okay, those students do not get credit. Okay, they have got to be there at the moment in time this is doing it. So there's no cheating or, piggybacking on other people's work. So I'm just wanting to put that out.
Yeah, I haven't found many programs that do this, but close that out, Pat.
Uh-huh.
And then this allows me to get that discussion. And when I build a discussion in class, I also, when they're on their asynchronous week, which you'll see in that second week outline, I have a lot more interaction, a lot more personalized emails, and a lot more engagement that I think many of us have been missing in this completely asynchronous online world or Zooming world that we've been living in. And I know, like, for example, San Jose State, it's now going to be a matter of social distancing when we go back in the fall and keeping classroom and space to a minimum. So this hybrid model is really going to be effective. And what you really need to think about when you're laying out your course for the fall or the summer or whatever it might be, what are your teaching strengths? What do you really like to do with your time in the classroom? And then use that model. And I'm just thankful that I have a tool that will really help me structure some of those group activities and use my time wisely and give all of the reading quizzes and the lecture on the asynchronous time so they're still keeping up. And let's look at that third model, Pat.
Oh, wait a minute. Let's hold on and do one more thing, Laura. I mentioned about the lecture, taking lecture to an asynchronous mode. So I want to point out that in Globalyceum, we do have what are called topical essays. And this is what I was speaking of when you're not recording your lecture, you're just presenting it in this format, you see. So this is a format that you can use. And there on the left, it's got the image or the video, and on the right, it has the text. And here's a video, okay, of the author. So we have these in Globalyceum, and this is this idea where you have a lecture, but the lecture is being delivered in this PowerPoint format, but in this case, side by side. Okay.
That connects to what Pat was saying earlier about students really doing well with just the PDF notes of your lecture for when you're trying to do that in the completely online environment. And the lectures that we have here are short. Each slide only takes a minute or two. And while the lecture is the traditional length, it's long. It runs about 30 to 40 minutes. It's broken down in really small pieces that the students seem to do well with and are able to digest. That's what makes these lectures a little bit different than us just recording ourselves.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to what we're calling the mirrored course.
So the mirrored course is something that is really new now that everybody has this up level in technology. It's where you get to do synchronous sessions online and face-to-face classes where you can combine your lecture, you can combine your group activities, and it just seamlessly goes from one week to the next. We now have the technology. Our students are familiar with this process, and this allows you to take the requirements of your campus where you can't be on campus every week, and really just keep your class going at this flow, utilizing all of the technology that we have available, doing those group projects, doing Zoom, and kind of taking everything together and giving it all you have. And let's look what this would look like in Globalyceum.
Okay, close these out. Hold on.
I think the important thing to notice is that you look at it and it looks pretty same week to week. So you have your class organization as always, you have a lecture quiz that you're going to give in class, and then you do 2 short activities in class. The next week, they're going to read, they're going to take their quizzes, they're going to listen to a lecture online that you give in real time. They're going to do a lecture poll on that for engagement, and then they're going to take a quiz before they leave that class session or at the end of the week. This is really saying, okay, I have these requirements, I have hybrid, I get the joy of seeing my students face to face, I get to do what I know and I love to do, but I also get to do that on the weeks that they can't come to campus. And it makes for a really interesting and dynamic presentation.
So this is the 14th Amendment lecture. So instead of delivering it in classroom, here you are basically presenting the PowerPoint. You know, every other image, every other slide is an image, every other slide is a text. Okay. Then I get side by side, it's up and down vertical. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is one of my own, or one of our own personal lectures. It's not a part of Globalyceum, so you can add all of your stuff in there, and it really flows nicely with the product. So again,
Go ahead.
there we go. No, again, this is kind of a nutshell of the 3 models that we have found to be highly successful. I don't do the lecture model, but I have a colleague at San Jose State. He is a brilliant lecturer and he's great. And that is his strength. So this would be something that he's going to use in the fall. Me, I'm going to do the group emphasis and spend most of my time doing in-class discussions and group work, and then moving my lectures and my quizzes online. You really need to take a look at your strengths and what you typically see your students do well on, and try to do a blend of that when you're teaching. Everything, again, it's that intentionality that is critical, and the design and organization of your setup. With this type of model, with a hybrid model, you really do have to think about how you are going to set it up and make sure you lay those expectations out for your students. And then you have a lot of success in that. And what you're hitting in class when you're having your face-to-face session, that should be mirrored in what you're doing in your synchronous session or your mirrored session for the off week that you're not in person. And
That's okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was going to say that if it was me, I'd take the mirrored. I probably would start with group emphasis and I'd move to mirrored, because I like the idea that I'm using the technology to basically mirror an in-class session. I'd want to push the envelope a little bit in that direction. Plus, the other advantage of it is that you're creating one curriculum, which you can teach in class, online, or hybrid. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? You're basically just switching the technology around, you know? So I'm creating one curriculum instead of creating 2 curricula, you know, for whatever. And the other thing is, you know, we never quite know whether we're going to have another pandemic, we're going to be bombed. The times we're living in nowadays, we never quite know when our campuses are going to get some kind of shut down. But I am worried that this is like, just this pandemic has been bad, but it might be that there's some other stuff coming down the tube. So, you know, to me, I like the advantage of the curriculum.
And it's interesting enough, my son's high school did the mirrored approach.
The mirrored approach.
Able to seamlessly go from, like, when they had to be quarantined and shut down, to face-to-face, to back to online,
Right.
face-to-face,
Didn't matter.
very easily with little to no disruption. So that is a high advantage of the mirror course.
And the other thing about it is too, is that this mirrored course, where you're with a group of people or you're online basically functioning, is basically also mirroring the work environment that we are moving into with white collar work. Laura and I are in the Bay Area of California, which is San Jose, but also San Francisco. All of these communities are finding that many businesses are simply not going to go back into the office. They're going to stay online for a lot of this, because they found that it's pretty functional and it's less expensive for their employees and for themselves. Okay. I suspect our kids are going to have to learn how to do that in the future. So you're kind of almost laying the groundwork for them by doing this. That's why it kind of appeals to me. I like that sort of thing.
I think the group emphasis is very close to that also, because they're doing the bulk of their individual work where they get to really take ownership of it on their off time. And with our students this year with the pandemic, has disrupted their lives greatly. So they do need more flexibility in time and to pick up extra jobs and so forth. So I notice, especially at the community college where I teach, that this has been a lifesaver, having due dates that they get to work their time schedule around, and they really get to apply the work, if it's meaningful group activities and things, just like Globalyceum has, to really have a deeper understanding of the content. So I would still do the group approach, or the group centered approach, if I was to go to a hybrid model in the fall.
Okay. Now, if anybody has any questions that they'd like to chat, go into the chat and ask your questions. I'm not seeing any questions just yet. So if anybody would like to go and do that. The other thing too is that you can simply reply back and submit your questions. I know that we're trying to answer many of your questions about choices that you have to make to go to a hybrid mode. But like I said, the real critical thing is, number one, you decide what's going to be in class. If it's going to be lecture, that's one thing. If it's going to be group, that's another thing. If it's going to be a mirror of what you're doing on both sides, lecture and group, okay, and you want to split it 50-50, on both sides so that you're mirroring, okay, well then that's another choice. But that's basically the biggest choice that you've got. The second is whether your university is allowing you to go synchronous. And as I said, by its very nature, if they're telling you you're going to teach a hybrid course, they've got to make it synchronous because they got to get the kids into the classroom. So they're going to tell the kids you can only have 9 to 10:30 with Professor Guardino. You know what I mean? That's it. You can't put a biology class there or some other class there. And that means that you will be allowed to go into more of an all synchronous environment if you wish to do so.
Pat, there's a couple of questions. Can you talk a little bit more about the group feature? Hearing you compare it to Canvas made me want to know more, since I use Canvas and find the group feature lacking. And then we also have, I've never done 1 week on campus and then 1 week off. I've always done 1 day a week on campus and then another asynchronous. Doesn't matter. I'll answer that question first because it's pretty easy. No, it doesn't matter. It's whatever the requirements of your university are and the physical space. A lot of this is going to have to do with physical space and social distancing. So if your campus is going to allow you to do one-on-one, it doesn't matter as long as it's that 50% break.
Okay. Laura, do you want me to share screen and we talk about that group
Yes.
thing?
And
Okay,
Pat, I have my other class to pop off to. So, and you're very familiar with the group feature. So I thank you for your time today. And I enjoyed being here and I wish everybody good luck in the fall.
Okay, Laura, I'm not seeing the chat questions. I'm not sure what's
Oh.
going on there.
It's there. There was only 2 and we answered 1.
Okay, great. All right. So again, having to do with this group. Hey, Laura, thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.
Right. Okay. So essentially, what happens in this this group piece, we have in American history 120 activities. In psychology, we have like about 45. In American government, we have like about 80. And so essentially, you're dragging over these activities, and so all of them work this way. But in Globalyceum, anything that has an assessment feature, which means it can be an activity or it can be a quiz, anything that has this assessment cog allows you to go and create a group activity out of it. Okay, so for example, in this group activity, basically the students go and they submit, the group leader submits. I hope that I'm answering the question properly. You can move the students around. You can say that you want, instead of having 5, you want 6, okay, and update. All right, so you can put them into groups. We have this little feature right here where we go and you've always got these students who are not quite sure whether they're in or out of your class. So we allow you to drag them down here without leaving them out, okay, of the group activity. Again, as I pointed out to you, the students who are in the group, they can see the activity on their side, but they cannot submit the answer for the group. Only Amy, for example, and Chris here can, for example. The other ones, however, will not get credit unless they go and they are in the assignment at the same time that Amy is before she submits. After she submits, they are blocked out of the assignment. They don't get credit. And then what happens is after you go and you have one of these assignments and the students have submitted, then you move over here and you've got what you call your easy grader. And it's in this easy grader you have, well, I don't have them now because I don't have students, who have taken the quiz, but essentially you drop it down and it will say group 1, Amy, and then it will say to you which students were there for the assignment, which students were not for the assignment. If you're really interested in this group grading piece that can be used with any quiz you make, any quiz we have, any activity that we have, I'm really happy to follow up with you or have one of my faculty advocates follow up with you to show you the ins and outs of this. We originally designed this. Mostly we started off by designing it for in-class, but we also had a lot of professors who had very, very large classes, 120, 150 students, and they wanted to do some subjective grading, but they didn't want to grade 150 assignments, okay? They wanted to only grade, like say, have 10 students in each group and do 15 assignments. That made that they had some analytical, subjective grading, but it wasn't overwhelming them. But also, like Laura and I, we are very accustomed to using a lot of activities when I taught, when she teaches now. And so this also allows us to do tons of these activities, which is what we really, really like. We built this for Globalyceum. It's very customized. I don't think that many of the LMSs have got it to that point yet, but this is one of our great features that we really enjoy working with the students. So this is something that, as I said, we'll be following up this webinar with an email to you, offering to send you the video, okay? Offering if you would like to go and actually open up an account with Globalyceum. As I said, there's no obligation. We would open up an account. You can stay in and look around in Globalyceum to your heart's content. And then we would create over here a section which is basically saying webinar on hybrid education. This is webinar on hybrid education. And then we would copy those in there, my faculty advocate. And you can follow up with Globalyceum. If you're interested in talking to us about any of our platforms, American government, American history, world history, Western civilization, Texas government, and psychology, okay, our platforms, we concentrate in the social sciences. And if you want to talk to a faculty advocate or myself, we do a follow-up, a $50 Amazon gift card and a 15 to 20-minute session, which shows you all of these things, and you can ask even more questions to your heart's content. Okay, so I thank you all for participating. As I said, if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to respond to that email. Don't hesitate to request an account. Don't hesitate to request a follow-up session with our Amazon gift card, which we always present to professors as a thank you for everything that you are doing out there and learning more about what's going on with us. Okay, so thank you very much, and we really appreciate your time and your listening. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.